Good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. I am Mark from Whiskey Brother, and this is another episode of WB Live. It feels like it's been a little while. I think we did take a bit of a break. As you may know, the new Whiskey Brother store opened, and it's been a bit all-consuming and all hands on deck. Yeah, so please excuse the absence. It's great to be back, and I think you'll forgive me for the break, because we do have a very special guest this evening. So not too much to say. When we do these, they focus on the guest we have. I'm also not going to give much of an introduction to Jack, because I think it's best to just actually start talking to him, and who better to give an introduction other than the man himself. So joining us live from Dublin is Jack Teeling. I'm going to bring Jack up. Jack, good evening. Can you hear me? How are you?
I'm all good, Mark. Delighted to be on WB Live, and as you say, coming live from nearly it was slightly sunny summer's day here in Dublin.
Excellent. We chatted briefly just to kind of do the normal audio video test, and you said you've been having some good weather. You look like you've got a good tan going. Is there something special happening in Ireland at the moment?
I've been for my sins during our lockdown. I've been doing a lot of running, so tend to get out on a nice sunny day and clock up a couple of kilometers and miles. And I suppose some of the benefits of working from home for most of the time is that a little flexibility about getting out in the sunshine when it's a nice day. So,
right.
So one of the only bright things that have come out of the last few months.
Yeah. How? On that note, how is in general? What's the scene like in Dublin, Ireland at the moment, and then also kind of the impact on the distillery? Are you guys open and running? Back to business?
Yeah, it's been pretty hard. We've had significant challenges. It was basically just before St. Patrick's Day kicked off, which would have been, the height of the tourism and hospitality season for us last year, and shut the doors, and a lot of pubs and bars in Ireland shut the doors down, expecting it was only going to be a couple of weeks, months, and they're still shut. We still haven't opened up, but what was great was alcohol manufacturing was deemed essential. So from a production perspective, we could keep the distillery working the whole time. So we're not going to have a big COVID hole in our inventory in years to come, which is great. So our distillery and our warehouses and maturation warehouses and bottlers and so forth were still operating away, but our offices were closed, and we had a pretty successful visitor center. We're getting over 100,000 people through, and that's been open and shut, but it's been very, very quiet. So if you're anything to do with hospitality or tourism, you've been decimated, just like the same as anywhere in the world. So
yeah.
But we're hopefully coming out of it now. We've had a very hard lockdown for the last nearly 6 months, and where vaccinations are catching up and so forth. So we're not as like the US or in the UK. We're not quite the same level of freedoms, but we're slowly but surely, hopefully getting there.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, and I think that means you've weathered the storm, at least weathered the worst of the storm. So as you say, it was not easy, and unfortunately there will have been lots of collateral damage to businesses and hospitality providers. But at least you're still standing, which is good, and it's nice to hear that production wasn't too badly impacted. At the moment, you live close to the distillery. Are you there every day? Do you kind of keep a tight watch on your team, or do they have the keys to the kingdom?
Yeah, well, I'm only less than 5 kilometers away from the distillery, so I'm quite close. I can get in and out very easily. But at this stage, we're 6 years into the production of the new distillery in Dublin. The team we have a good team. Alex Chaska, our master distiller, and a range of good distillers. So in a way, it nearly looks after itself. But I'm in and out a couple of days a week just to make sure things are going smoothly. And look, you have to taste a lot of the liquids prior to bottling and so forth. So it's very hard to do that virtually. So you need to get around a table and get a couple of taste buds on it to deliver the taste that we're trying to achieve. So I suppose I've been lucky in that I can. This is my home office. I'm surrounded by my bottles, and so always surrounded by whiskey no matter where I go. But I've been able to manage the work and home life quite well, and I go in when I want, I go in when I need. We've been managed, like even last year we launched more new products last year than we ever did. And we did more activation and social media things than we ever did. So we're very proud of the team in terms of, even with the challenges of not being together, we still got a lot of things done. We're lucky that we have a good team around us, so I'm blessed.
Excellent. That's great to hear. We haven't seen many of those new releases in South Africa yet, but we'll get there. I don't want to jump the gun. I know they're all coming. Fingers crossed. Crossed. Speaking to someone like yourself, there's so much we can talk about, and I'm almost, I almost don't know where to start. I absolutely want to talk about kind of the distillery as we know it today, the newer distillery. But I can't overlook the fact that you have a long family history to a large extent of whiskey making. Reading, if you do any reading about Teeling, you'll read about Walter Teeling, who started a distillery not far from where Teeling is today, back in 1782. That's over 200 years. Was that distillery called Teeling Distillery as well? It wasn't clear to me doing the research.
Yeah, well, like back then, these were small. It's not like a modern distillery. It's very much a craft mom and pop distillery. And at the time, just even in let's say the city, which was a lot smaller than it is now, there was 37 other distilleries. So if you were kind of a merchant family involved in buying and selling and any kind of commercial elements, you tend to have some involvement in either making beer or making whiskey, and they fluctuated between the two. So we were one of many, and our family was involved in a multitude of different industries, and I went through a couple of different generations until what really happened in the 19th century was the small industries became big distilleries, and there was a lot of consolidation, and unless you were well funded, you didn't really survive. So that distillery was actually sold and became part of a much larger distillery called the Marylebone Lane Distillery, which was actually built by William Jemison and John Jemison's son. So I'd say it was very ancestral industry back then, and it is even to this day. So our family was involved in and out of it rather than a solid line. My great grandfather on my mother's side was involved in powers and all that. It was such a big industry in Dublin in particular. It touched and connected a lot of different people, a lot of different families, and it wasn't the 1970s that industry disappeared from the city of Dublin. But our recent involvement came from my father, and he got the inspiration while he was studying in the US in the 70s. At that stage, the Irish whiskey industry was really gone. It was very much a domestic focused industry and very undynamic internationally. And Scotland had taken our crown and had run with it, and was much bigger, much more dynamic, capturing the imagination of consumers back in the 60s, 70s. My dad saw that firsthand, and he also knew about all the heritage and all the history of Irish whiskey. And at that stage, there was only one entity or one company controlling the whole industry. So it was one monopolistic producer. They were amalgamation of Irish families, and they weren't dynamic, or they weren't really good at international marketing. And he thought he could do it better. So he got a chance to buy an alcohol plant in the 80s, and he set up the first new distillery in over 100 years. It was called Cooley Distillery. And so 1987, And a year later, that monopoly got basically acquired by Pernod Ricard. And since then, the 1990s onwards, Irish whiskey has just been literally on fire and been the fastest growing spirits category for quite some time. And we caught up quite a way with our Scottish neighbours, but it's still a long way to go. And one of the stars, over the last 20-25 years has definitely been South Africa. South Africa has been an amazing success story for Irish whiskey, mainly for Jameson. But
yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
But yeah, well, they that's what they did. Pernod brought the marketing, the spend, the route to market, and they presented Irish whiskey to a new generation, and I suppose it tapped into the desire for authenticity, provenance, but something new and something maybe a little bit lighter to discover and enjoy as well. Right. And that's really where I suppose the category gets. And I'm going all over it. And then my involvement came in 2000, 2001, working with my father in Teeling Distillery. And I suppose I learned very much the importance of production, the quality of liquid, the challenges of trying to create a brand, against big multinationals, the challenges of international marketing and so forth. And I luckily got to go around the world, down to South Africa, all over the world, trying to promote Cooley and work with our distributors. I became the managing director in, I'm trying to remember it now. It's I was trying to think just the other day how long I've been at it now. It was 2010. Became the managing director of Cooley, and then only a short time later it was sold. So I'm not sure my father was so happy with me becoming the managing director and sell the company, but the company was sold, and I suppose that
you either did a really good job or you did a really bad job.
Yeah, well, I think I always look back and I said I did equally good and bad, because I probably wasn't very good at placating the old shareholders about what I wanted to do, but I managed to get a good bit of traction in the business, so that attracted people to the industry. But look, in reality, Teeling Distillery was the only independent, it was the only way into Irish whiskey at the time, and there was a lot of people interested because of the growth in the category and because they saw where it was going. A company who had just spun out of a multinational, a small company called Beam, decided they had a missing link in their whiskey portfolio, and Irish whiskey made a good story, and they thought they could do a good job, and they put a very fair offer on the table. And Cooley was at that stage had many shareholders because it needed to fund itself in the early days, because my dad didn't have the money to do it all by himself, and they had lost a lot of money during the crash, the property crash, and their pensions had disappeared. So they were very happy to take a check, and that created this great opportunity for me to step away and just do something myself, and take all the learnings and all the insights I probably had generated myself from being out and seeing what was working, what wasn't working, being excited by craft beer and premium bourbons and Scotch single malts and all this. So much great stuff going on, and the category and consumers were changing, and I felt I had unfinished business and also a unique insight that I wanted to take advantage of. So I decided the Teeling Whiskey Company was born, and reality
reborn.
Yeah, well, reborn. But the reality of where it came from, I was trying to negotiate a supply contract from Beam, and I had to come up with the name of a company to put on a heads of agreement, just basically one page kind of agreement. And before I'd really formulated all my ideas, and I said, Teeling Whiskey Company. That was the start of it, and I wasn't sure really the brand but I had a clear vision of where I wanted the distillery to be, and that was to be in Dublin. Right. And I wanted to be in Dublin. I wanted to be where our family the very, very start of it. But at that stage, I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to put the Teeling name on it, because some of the links, I knew about it, but I didn't know about it. I wasn't that comfortable, right. and so I had to get someone. I got a researcher to go to Dublin Castle and find as much information on it, just to prove to me that
Right.
I can say those things. And exactly, I didn't even know the date, like when it started. Like it was things like that. I just knew of the background and the kind of more of mythology than reality. So I wanted something tangible there to do. And once I did that, it felt right. And the reason why it's called Teeling whiskey was because there was no such thing as Irish whiskey or Dublin whiskey. It was literally just where it was made, proprietor. And anything we could find, it was just that's the way it was described. So that's why it's not Teeling Irish whiskey. It's it's Teeling whiskey, and that's where I came from. But the kernel of it was city centre based location, reviving distilling in the capital of Dublin and doing it in a modern way, but true to, I suppose, the roots that we had, and building on what was created before us.
Right. So, I mean, at the time when you opened the distillery was what, 2015? And I mean, that was the first new distillery in Dublin in 125 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And the first distillery to actually produce whiskey in Dublin again since the late 1960s, when the consolidation happened and New Middleton was built.
Yeah, it was 70s actually. The last
70s.
The shuttered store was Powers, and that was in 1976. And
right? Okay.
The same year I was born, so I didn't know at the time that I was put on this earth to do something, to revive distilling in the city of Dublin and to bring the fabric of
the prodigal great grandson returns.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I was going to ask you about that. So, I mean, when you were growing up, your father would have been, I mean, growing up, but through a certain period of your life, your father would have been at Cooley, hard at work there. I mean, were you, before you got involved in Teeling, in Cooley, were you kind of familiar with Cooley? Were you spending time there? I mean, now, as you mentioned when we opened that, your world is kind of surrounded by whiskey now. What was it like that when your father was engrossed in Cooley?
Yeah, it was. It was. I remember being brought up to the old alcohol plant and being shown this monstrosity that my father had just bought or was planning to buy, and it was behind locked gates, and they didn't have any security guard, but they had geese. And you're walking around the place, and it's as a young boy, it's scary. My dad was trying to throw me over the gate, and I was like, no, they break your legs. And he said, they're not. So I was exposed to it and that, but I suppose it was an entrepreneurial family that I was born into, and my dad was very much everything. Business was life, so constantly at the kitchen table you were just talking about the challenges. And my work experience when I was in school was working in Cooley Distillery, going down, families then to open up warehouses, maturation warehouses, and all that kind of stuff like that. So it was definitely part of the fabric of my upbringing. But I'll be honest with you, I never really saw myself going into it, because I never saw myself working with my father, because my father's quite a strong personality, and father-son dynamic kind of were probably more like than we let on, and we kind of strong minds kind of bang heads.
Right.
But I got the opportunity I came back. I was actually working overseas. I was working in Australia, and I came back to Ireland, and I was given a chance to go into work, and I think I enjoyed my time so much in Australia that I was in such a good mood when I got back. I said, oh yeah, I'm not sure really what I want to do, but I'll go in and work for 6 months. And my girlfriend, now wife, was like, what are you doing? You're crazy. You're going to kill each other. But it wasn't until I got into it and actually got my, I'd been in kind of the financial services side of things, numbers and spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff like that, to be in something that's so tangible. And making and be involved in all aspects of the stage of production to the finished product, and seeing it on shelf and see people enjoy it, and the fact that the opportunity was a global opportunity for whiskey, Irish whiskey. It hooked me in, and I really got as we say, a graw, which is a low for it, and I have to thank my father. Like he gave me the opportunity, and he instilled the passion that I now have for what we do and what Irish whiskey can be and will be.
Right, brilliant. So before we then, I want to move to Teeling Distillery and what you've done along with your brother. But just before that, another quick detour, if you'll just if you'll bear with me, which is a Great Northern Distillery.
Yeah.
Right. So that distillery was found, I mean, practically the same time as Teeling, if I'm not mistaken. Right. It was about 2015. It is a behemoth of a distillery, as far as I understand. And am I correct in saying that's what your father is now doing?
Yeah. Yeah. So I did it the hard way. I built it from scratch. So I set up the Teeling Whiskey Company in 2012.
Right.
We found a site that we eventually got built in 2012, and we didn't get it finished till 2015. So he said, forget about that. I'm just going to buy. So he basically replicated what he did with Cooley, and he bought an old Guinness Diageo brewery and converted that into a grain and malt distillery. So what we used to do in Cooley was we had a range of brands, some very old brands that had been acquired and repackaged and relaunched. And then we also did a lot of contract manufacturing because there was no one else. So anyone wanted, let's say, if a retailer down in South Africa called a Liquor City or Spar or any of the kind of big box stores, they wanted a private label, they would have gone to Cooley and we would have created this product. And what my father said, look, there's a gap in the market for that, so I'm going to build what we had in Cooley, and I'll go again and I'll just do that. So they're solely a contract manufacturer. And for example, like our distillery in Dublin, it's a traditional pot still distillery. We do pot still, peat and single malt. We don't have grain, so they're our grain supplier. So we keep it in the family. So it's a grain, and the grain distillery are big behemoths.
Yeah.
You have to have scale. It's more like an industrial facility, chemical plant, and
So it's producing both.
Yeah.
Both grain and all right.
So
grain and malt.
So if there's any like virtual brands that are out there, more than likely they're dealing with my father and the Great Northern Distillery.
Right.
There's a need for it, and but I always say it was like, because I wouldn't let him into the Teeling Whiskey Company, like because it's I set it up and Stephen joined me.
It's your baby.
And I wanted to do it my way. So I think he went off and created his own. but no, in fairness, it's he's a big long-term believer in the category and grain whiskey, and that structural need to have whiskey that you can sell to people who can't or don't want to build their own distillery.
Right. You must be one of the few private families in the world that have, in essence, 2 distilleries, in operation and active. That's quite a feat. Yeah. All right. So then, thank you for kind of bearing with me. I mean, there's so much history there. It's great to touch on it. So thank you. So now moving more to Teeling Distillery in Dublin, your endeavor, along with your brother Stephen, opened in 2015, first new distillery, as we said. And what was that process like? I mean, did it become more than just making whiskey for yourself under the Teeling name? I mean, did you just have a sense of like, okay, wow, I mean, we're reopening up whiskey here in Dublin. Was there an additional sense of responsibility to what you were doing?
Yeah, like I think the vision, the goal, was two-sided. One was to ensure there's enough breadth and choice in Irish whiskey to allow consumers and whiskey drinkers to discover something new and interesting, and they stay within the category. It was like, I'll be honest with you, I was very passionate about that and what our role was going to be in that. And then, if we could prove we were successful, then it proves for other people to be successful. And secondly, it was something that I saw. This was predating, Cooley being sold. It was when I was in Cooley. I was just like, God, because I've done a lot of research and know a lot of all the famous distilleries in Dublin. I knew a good bit of the history, and I was going around the world, and there was an explosion of craft breweries opening up in cities, and then it became craft distilleries and whiskey distilleries in interesting locations and places like that, be it in San Francisco, be it in Chicago, be it in London, be it whatever.
Yeah.
And I was just like going like, there's nowhere else in the world. There's nowhere else. Dublin was the epicenter for urban-based distilleries. So like, people don't know that. And even my friends, the people I grew up in Dublin, I'm born and bred, multi-generational Dub, they didn't even know that. And the Dublin brands like Jameson Powers, these were made in Dublin. Now they're not.
Yeah.
They're made down in Cork. So it was blaringly obvious that someone had to do it, and I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it right. I wanted to do it in a way that I felt represented modern Ireland and modern Dublin. So it's not like an ode to the past. It's about like, hey, we're a young, confident, successful country now. We weren't back then. We were very poor. Like we had, emigration. Whiskey was one of our great exports, but so were people. But now people didn't have to leave; they chose to leave, which is a big difference. Like if you're starving and no options, then you have to emigrate to get a job. That's a bit different than I'm going to London or I'm going to Sydney or I'm going to Johannesburg to get a good job. Choosing to do that because I want to experience life and like blah blah blah. So I wanted something that was like that, and it wasn't, as I said. It looked and felt like every other brand that was out there. It represented who we were and who we are now as a nation and Dublin as a capital. So that was the big goal. It was just I struggled to put it together. And choosing an urban location is planning, in that everyone wants to push industry out of the city, and secondly because there has never been a distillery through a modern planning process in city. So it became a lot more difficult. I'm not a property guy at all. I know a lot more now than I did. I was very naive going into it, it took a lot longer to get things right and tick the boxes and all that sort. And to be honest with you, pull together the money to be able to do it, because it's probably the most expensive location to build, rather than down the country, which has a lot of benefits from a manufacturing perspective. But for what we wanted to do as a brand and as a vision for what the company was all about, it had to be in Dublin.
Right. I mean, looking back now, did everything turn out like you hoped and like you planned, or were there sacrifices made and I guess corners cut intentionally just based on the location?
Yeah, well, we kind of ran out of money because I probably hadn't. I say this now, but it cost the guts 10 million to build, and I think we had around $500,000 in our bank account when we did that. So and we signed up to start the process. So we borrowed to get it built. And one thing we did do at the start, which kind of changed things quite a lot, was we ended up buying quite a bit of inventory. That early in 2012 and 13, that we didn't actually foresee being available at the start. And all the proceeds, like I had a shareholding in Cooley, sold shares, and I was like, oh yeah, this is great. Don't have to worry about anything now. Like, got a bit of money and blah blah blah. I'm gonna start a new company and we'll take it kind of slowly. But then this stock came out, and I went, okay, buy it. All my money goes into whiskey inventory. So that kind of sharps your mind, and all of a sudden it threw out a lot more opportunities that we could aim to scale the business and create products and get it out into market, and use that funds as we grew the business to fund building the distillery. So it did kind of delay things, but it was the right thing to do. And what was very important for us is that we got the whiskey under our warehouse so that we could evolve it and give it a Teeling twist or effect by using innovative cask maturation that hadn't really been used at that time, to try and layer on top extra flavor. So all our whiskeys have a bit of a unique twist to it, or the taste profile that we've generated from different casks that we're using. And now that the distillate is coming through, it's throwing out a lot more opportunities to do other things, which is like use innovative mash bills or innovative yeast strains, and how we run our stills, along with the combination of unique casks to create an ongoing interesting journey in terms of discovery for Teeling and Irish whiskey.
Right. I mean, and to your point there, I think what at the time, I feel like you were quite innovative and one of the first brands to do that in terms that you had a whiskey brand before you had the distillery. I mean, as you said, the Teeling Whiskey Company was 2012 and the distillery was 2015. And because you purchased all that stock from Cooley, from where you were, you could have a brand and you could generate sales. I feel like at the time it was quite novel, and it wasn't something that had been particularly done before by new producers. Look at Aaron, look at Kilhoman as Scottish examples. They waited until they had whiskey. Since you've done it, however, I mean, now it feels like it is the way to go. I mean, and particularly in Ireland, where there is so much white labeling, so much sourcing of whiskey, there are now dozens of new distilleries, and they already mostly have a brand out and have some whiskey in the market. So I guess well done for setting the trend there.
Yeah. And look, that's there's not a shortage of entrepreneurship in Ireland, but I think if I look back in 2012, no one was doing it. And a lot of people have followed our lead in terms of even bottling at 46% non-chill filtered, using unique cask and so forth. But again, a lot of these guys don't have their own warehouses. They don't have different things, and I think it's for some of them they'll struggle to stand out from the crowd.
Right.
And that's just reality. Like if everyone's out there doing the same thing, well, what's underneath the covers when you go looking. And I think very important for us is that it was always a short-term measure to help us get up and going and to grasp distribution and get out there, because I felt the consumers needed it, and in particular there's a lot of our customers who were crying out for Irish whiskies and a range of Irish whiskies, and that's what we did. And we brought out our small batch, which was an evolution of a blended Irish whiskey, broke it out into its individual components with a single grain, a single malt. And then, I suppose we were very lucky to have some very old inventory, and we brought out some of the vintage reserve collections, and we've released whiskies up to 37 years old, but we do it in a very mindful way, and ensure that I suppose we're representing the legacy of this whiskey in the right way. So yeah, look, it's an exciting time, but you're right. There's a lot of distilleries out there. There's a lot of noise. Some good things, some okay things. It would be interesting to see how things settle down over the next 5 to 10 years. But hopefully, at that stage, a lot of people will be producing their own liquid, and there will be quite a diverse taste profile there for people to enjoy. Because for me, for example, if we pick something like single pot still, they shouldn't all taste like the single pot stills you taste already, because they all come from one distillery. They should all taste different, and the more different, the better. So if a single pot still doesn't taste like a Redbreast 12-year-old, good. It's not meant to. You're not trying to create the same taste profile, So it's an interesting stage, but I think the opportunity is still very, very big for Irish whiskey. It's still only at the early stages of that segmentation evolution. Still most of the big brands, big sellers are all blends. Single malt, single pot stills. They're only at the early stages of being discovered or found. And I think consumers today are much more open. It's not just about where they come from. It's, are they any good? Are they interesting? And if they are, well, then Irish single malts, for example, deserves to be at the table, but they have to be good and interesting. They can't just be Irish, if you know what I mean.
It doesn't buy them necessarily a seat at the table just because of where they are, right? It's what they're doing and the quality. I mean, it's funny because you mentioned single pot still, and generally, for better or for worse, it's often kind of the phrase is, it's quintessentially Irish. I mean, that is the unique style of Irish whiskey. But as you pointed out, there is historically, there was only one producer of single pot still over the last 20, 30 years. Now, among the new generation of distillers, including Teeling, single pot still is now being produced at multiple distilleries. And as you say, suddenly there's this opportunity to actually see what single pot still is actually about, not just from one distillery's output. So, I mean, I'm really looking. I've tried your single pot still, the Teeling one, and I look forward to just seeing what single pot still can actually do, based on the producer and what they, how they produce it, etc., etc.
Well, if you get your hands on some of the old actual bottlings of Dublin, pot still, it tastes nothing like what you taste today. It's got massive, different taste profiles. And as I mean, like, there's a lot of diversity around single pot still that will come out. And the guys in IDL Pernod have done a great job, obviously developing consumer awareness of it, and some of the whiskies are exceptional. But there's room and need for more. And again, it'll be interesting to see, as you say, over the next 5 to 10 years that category will definitely do it. But I also feel Irish single malt is significantly underrepresented in the world single malt category, and a lot of work to be done there. And it's good to see some of the other larger producers now becoming a little bit more innovative and creative around getting awareness and traction of it. Like, I'll name Jack Teeling, Bushmills, and for example, or Bushmills have really kind of stepped up their game recently in Europe anyway. And obviously Mark Rainier in Waterford is going a different track and trying to do his own thing. But that's good. That's what it's all about. It needs people like that pushing the boundaries, trying new things, and just getting excitement and energy into the category.
And that experimentation, that giving the consumer variety, as you say. So when we think about Irish whiskey, and it's interesting because even for the last 5-10 years, if you spoke about Irish whiskey to a general whiskey consumer, in their mind, if they didn't know the numbers, they would swear that the Irish industry is similar size to the Scottish industry. But I mean, that obviously wasn't the case. And if you just walked into any decent whiskey store, you would see the massive range of Scotch compared to a fairly small selection of Irish. And a lot of that would be coming from the same distillery or two. So, I mean, it's exciting times ahead. I mean, for Teeling, you had whiskey out then before the distillery started. You now have been producing, and you have mature whiskey coming from the distillery. But I mean, how do you ensure that there isn't kind of a sudden change in flavor profile between what it is essentially a different distillery to where it's now coming from?
Yeah, it's a good point. But I suppose went into it, and the products we actually created, it was like, people go, oh, you didn't think? Yeah, we did actually. We thought, because we wanted the signature taste profile of the product to allow us to use different feedstock to so long as the overarching, or let's say the taste profile you're trying to create stay the same. And shot car we actually have. There was a very fruit forward single malt that we wanted to create, and we managed to achieve that very, very well. So for a blend grain, we're getting our grain from G&D, and it's very much very close to the specification what we would have had before. So that works. Our malt works, and then the step that we do to make it what it is, which is over 12 months in Central American rum barrel, actually creates that signature taste profile. So so long as the base ingredients are good quality, have gone through a full maturation, come out the other side tasting as they should do, and that extra step produces for a single grain full maturation in Californian, ex-Californian Cabernet Sauvignon, that delivers all the flavor. The underlying grain aspect is still there because the corn, the sweetness is still there, but you get all that wood and the fruit and the unique combination from that style of barrel that we've chosen. The single malt's a harder one, but we're working on that. We believe we have a solution that won't be exactly the same, but it's going to be pretty much in the same ballpark in terms of it's a real like ball. It's like a fruit bowl, and that has all this fruit forward elements of it. And we've actually worked with crystallized malt, malted barley, and distill that through, and it really brings a taste profile that we didn't think we'd be able to get with a relatively 5 or 6 year old single malt. But it's at the moment it seems to be doing what we want it to do, and hopefully we'll transition across that very soon.
Okay, so I mean, it's just to be clear there, the single malt that has been released so far under the Teeling brand, is any of that coming from the new distillery yet? Is there a combination of new and old, or is it
No,
All
it's
new.
so it's single, yeah. So it's 100%.
Yeah, of course, yeah. It couldn't be. It couldn't be a combination of. Sorry, it'd be a blended malt then.
No,
My.
it's just yeah. No, it's a good question. It would have been easier for us to
It would
go
be
down
nice, yeah.
all the way, but we haven't decided that we weren't going to do that. So, but as I said, I think the taste profile, and we've been working for a while, and we're hoping that next year the whiskey will be ready to be able to do it. As you said, it will be slightly different, but the overarching taste profile, which is, as I said, very much fruit forward style of single malt, using, because we use a white wine yeast in our fermentation, actually extenuates quite a lot of stone fruits in the underlying spirit, and then using high quality, Madeira, port, casks again can bring some of those other elements in. So we're getting there. But like, as you said, the single malt, and we've been thinking about what we should do about it. Should we create a new program? But we said people like what we have already, and can we match it? And we believe we can. But we'll make it clear to people, because of it will be reborn 2012. The bottle will have different features on it. But we're hoping that, as I said, the overarching taste experience is maintained. But that's probably been the most challenging one. And the rest, for example, like the single pot still, 100% distills. We have no benchmark to go with.
Right.
But we do have the problem. It doesn't taste like redbreast, and we're like, it's not meant to taste like redbreast. We don't want to taste like redbreast. But we've taken that unique cask maturation. So we use 3 different casks: sherry, virgin American oak, and bourbon barrels to produce a taste profile that we're happy with that. And we did a bit of experimentation, and then our latest release, which is a peated single malt, which has triple distilled, so it doesn't have the high levels of phenols that you get in a double distilled single malt, and has dual maturation in sauter and dessert wine, so sweet, white, and bourbon, to produce a real unique, distinctively Teeling tasting single malt.
What the it's okay. The peated single malt then is not from Teeling Distillery yet either. Are you doing peated runs at the distillery at the moment?
Yeah, so the Black Pits is 100% distilled. So our distillery, the way we built it was, we wanted it to be very flexible, allow us to produce different styles of pot still, and we're producing, like, we've done crystallized rye, we've done some chocolate malt, some old porter recipes. Every year we allocate a percentage to unique kind of R&D type projects, hopefully all good enough that we'll release them at some stage, but it had to be able to produce pot still, had to be able to produce single malt, and to go from peated to single malt, it's a bit messy, just because of, you have to ensure all your
switching,
faints are all switched out, all that kind of stuff like that. But it's something I like, the style of whiskey. I like what we did in Cooley in our Connemara days. Felt there was still a lot of, again, one style of peated Irish single malt. Forget about that.
Yeah.
It had to be something more. And our 28-year-old or 24-year-old, which was 24-year-old single malt that won the world's best single malt. So not just the best Irish single malt, the world's best single malt at the World Whiskey Awards. That had this little bit of peat in the mash bill, and also the sauter and cask, and it worked really well. Right. But why don't we do it again? If people like it and I like it, let's do it and see if it works. So that's where the inspiration came for the sauter and cask with the peat, and you know what? It works. It works for what we want. But it's into your big slap in the face, Lefroy, very high. Octomore experience. It's not that, it's different, and that's what we're all about. It's got a little bit of sweetness and the smoke and lovely smoothness to it. So it's a different. It's like a barbecue smoke because of the low phenols that are actually there. The way I describe it is barbecue pineapple type influence coming through. So really, really interesting, and we've been delighted with the consumer response to it as well.
How challenging is it? And maybe it isn't a challenge at all, but I would think so, because I mean, a lot of distilleries just produce one particular style. and that's it, right? You're now doing, you're doing single pot still, you're doing, peated malt, you're doing unpeated malt. I mean, does it apart from the switching in terms of distillation, just from a maturation point of view, does it make things particularly complex or not very much so?
I think, to be honest with you, going from peated to unpeated, or peated to unpeated, or peated to unpeated, that's easy. It's going from introducing the unmalted barley for pot still is difficult. It's much harder, and your milling. It's about getting your milling correct. It can from we didn't really we made a little bit of pot still. I mean, a really small amount in Cooley, but the whole system was optimized for single malt. So when we tried to do it to screw the whole thing up, it was an absolute disaster. And I find a lot of people who would switch between the two, they'd find the pot still much more challenging, and get really bad yields or low amount of alcohol out of it because the system's not set out for it. So we started off, very first thing we produced was single pot still, and we found going on to malted whiskey was a lot easier. So every time we go back to the pot still, it tends to, we have to give ourselves like a week to try and get it right. So it's definitely a manual aspect to try and get that milling right because every batch of the spring barley, the unmalted barley, can be slightly different in terms of the texture and how hard it is and different things like that. So it's pretty challenging, but hopefully, touch wood, we know what we're doing now. But
got it down now, yeah. And in terms of the mashing and the fermentation, I mean, I'd imagine there's changes there. Same thing, a bit of a learning curve to start, and now what needs to be done.
Yeah, and it was like again, what we wanted to achieve with the base spirit. We knew what we wanted. We weren't sure how to get there. So we played around on the fermentation, even the length of fermentation. So look, there was. I remember very first batch wild fermentation going on. So I swear to God, we just said, well, we'll leave it open and see what happens. And yeah, it was a wild fermentation. We're like, I'm not sure we want this ongoing.
Right.
So yeah, there's lots of learnings, and even we have a well, so we tap into our own water source. We're sitting Dublin is famous because it's got a lot of water. Like it was called Dublin, which is Blackpool. So it was technically, the reason why there was lots of distilleries and breweries all around and mills, because there was loads of tributaries, loads of water, and we tapped into that whole thing. But even getting the pH of that right, there's loads of problems. But it's not new. Every distillery has its challenges. But I think landing on the proprietary blend of different yeast strains took a while to get right. And we ended up getting, using some traditional distillers yeast, because we looked at the old all the records, and we were like, we want an old fashioned yeast the way it would have been back then. But the yeast has actually evolved over time, and the distiller's yeast now is the same as it was then. It's just been optimized along the way. So we couldn't figure out. So then we said, well, what else is there? There's a beer yeast, there's white wine yeast, and so forth. And we played around with it for quite some time, and what we've come up with now does what we want. And that's around 2/3 traditional distiller's yeast and 1/3 white wine yeast, and it, as I said, well for us.
Okay, and you use that for both your malt and your single pot still variant, the same type of yeast. Okay, that's very cool.
What you find is that the base spirit is consistent. It's got this, as I said, stone fruit forward. Some of the taste profile, is coming through even on the mature product between the pot still, the malt, and the peated malt. You can still taste that underlying fruit influence that we believe is coming from the yeast in particular.
Right. So, and then, I mean, with being an urban distillery, do you have space for maturation stores? I mean, are you moving a lot of the casks outside of Dublin to other maturation stores?
Yeah. Look, so as you said, I bought a lot of stock back in 2012, and we had to find a home for it very quickly. And that's where our maturation. So we're in a place called just up the coast, around an hour north of the city, in a place called Greenore, and we have our maturation warehouses there, and that's where we have all our dumping, filling, hand bottling, and so forth that goes on there. So we still use there, because where we are, it's like literally, if you've been in Dublin and Stephen's Green and Trinity College, they're only 10-minute walks away from us, so it's not the best. And we're surrounded by lots of development now. So when we were there, it was quite industrial, but now there's a new Marriott hotel. There's a lot of stuff being built. There's a brand new 4-story modern office block right beside us, and so forth. So we're being surrounded. So definitely not the right place for maturation warehouses for a multitude of reasons. One, it's very expensive. Secondly, fire risk, and thirdly is the angel share and the black fungus that naturally occurs.
Right.
Not a suitable location for it. So we have a couple of barrels just there, and they're if you go into the distillery, my daughter's names are on the pot stills, because Stephen didn't have any kids when the distillery was built. Now he's got 2 daughters as well. I don't know if it must be something to do with the whiskey that we all have daughters. So he's got special barrels filled for the days his daughters were born. So it's a Teeling family vault. When you go to the distillery, you can see.
Okay. So looking forward then, I mean, just in terms of, you've had a few new releases. You said last year was a bumper year for new releases. I mean, as a market in South Africa, last year was a tough year, not only for us, but we didn't get much of anything new. We hope in time we'll get a whole bunch of these new products, but what else do you have planned? I mean, you are doing a fair amount of limited releases. Are there any kind of core range additions coming, or anything you can just kind of give us some insight scoop on?
Look, we're always trying to push the boundary, and we do a lot of collaborations. And again, these are kind of limited offerings. We work with other producers, be it a beer producer, be it a rum producer. We've done stuff with the guys at Fermentation. We've done stuff with international and local craft breweries. In St. Gunn, we did stuff with. We did Dot Brew, was a small little guy beside us. So we'll continue to do that. We're also playing around with lots of different types of wine casks to see how they influence. We call it sommelier selection, and we've done it with French. It's going to be Italian wines, and then we're going to have Spanish and Portuguese. Maybe we'll have South African in the future. Who knows?
Hope so.
So we like to do those things, and just to see what the influence will be. I think what we're going to have a bit of fun with now is obviously our new distillate. And seeing how that evolves, and seeing how some of these unique mash bills that we have, like the crystal malt, like the crystallized rye, like the we've done some double distilled super heavy piece, lots of things. We have loads of options. It's about releasing them in a mindful and logical way,
right?
Rather than a kid in the candy shop, which is sometimes we can be a bit like, oh, let's get all this cast, let's do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do we do that? Like you have some of this Mujai Soshu cast that I got from a friend of mine over in Japan, and it's crazy stuff. But it's like, how do we release it? I don't know. We have some Ambarana, Brazilian hardwoods casks, and produces this real super funky taste experience. And again, we've done limited release of a single cask, but what do we do? How do we make it bigger? So lots of options, which is great. I'm all about having options, but it's about releasing them in not overwhelming people and releasing them gradually over time. So lots more to come. Right. Probably something that we're looking at releasing later this year would be we have this Wonders of Wood concept, which happens to be run by a gentleman called Ian Wood, who's our master of maturation or operations manager, if you want to call him. He's a young Scots guy who works with us. He's been working with us, from early doors, and with a name like Wood,
he's found his calling.
Yeah, exactly. So we're focusing on unique cask maturation for that, and particularly different types of oak, like lots of different types of oak out there.
Right.
And we will have a release probably at the back end of the year, and that would be our single pot still, an evolution of that range. We're looking at maybe some aged single grain, different things like that as well in the short term, along with again some very old releases like we have in Europe anyway, and Asian places, a 32-year-old release, limited release coming out later this year as well.
Okay, I mean you touched on wood there. So, I mean, if you're an Irish producer, you do have some more flexibility than, let's say, Scotland has. You're not confined to just using oak. I mean, and at the moment, you're embracing that by the sounds of things, and just kind of experimenting as much as you can.
Yeah, you know, because it produced something interesting, and as you said, it's about learning as much as anything else. So we've done acacia, cherry wood, chestnuts, multiple types of chestnut, which actually, shame on me, it is a variant of oak.
Right.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay, well, okay, we'll do that. But like, there's within oak, there's, you know, Portuguese, the Spanish oak, there's, you know, Carpathian oak, there's Caucasian oak, there's, you know, Irish oak, which is the same vein as Hungarian oak and French
Right.
oak. They all produce different flavors. We do this chinkapin, it's a style of American white oak, which is produce a very different flavor than your traditional white oak as well. Like, you know, so there's lots of different variables. And that's the thing for me, is like, you know, whiskey's been made a certain way for a long time. So and there's rules and regulations, and rightly so. But within those rules and regulations, there's still loads of scope to try different things. And you know, some won't work, some will work. But unless you try, you'll never learn. So that's why we're trying. We're playing with all the levers. So we're playing with mash bills. We're playing with, you know, yeast. We're playing and how we use our stills. And then, you know, how what wood you use. And then, you know, you have this toolkit that you use then to create your products. And the more options you have, you know, the more fun you can have. So long as the whiskey is good, that's at the end of the day. Beaten into me by working in Cooley is lead with the liquid, all the rest will follow.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, it's exciting times, and I mean, you know, you've already released a lot. You know, watch the space. It's exciting though that, you know, because I think too often a producer plays it safe, and maybe the environment now with so many new producers, you know, to some degree, some will be forced to do something differently. But it sounds like, I mean, you've got the experimentation in your blood. As long as the liquid's good, like you say, then why not play with your toolkit?
Yeah, well, I think what's happening is, like, people like ourselves are being innovative and it's forcing everyone else to be innovative. And the bigger guys now are bringing out more and interesting things, which is what consumers want, what drinkers want, and what the category needs. So will we go too far? No doubt. We'll do too many things, I'm sure. Will we bring it back then? Yeah, but like you'll learn as you go along. And but as I said, Irish whiskey, it's going through, you know, dynamic growth. And that growth is bringing new people and new energy. And so long as we all produce good whiskey, hopefully the future's bright.
Yeah, I think the future is very bright. And speaking of the future, I mean, I know at the moment it's hard to make plans, but you know, when travel is opens up again, can we expect to see you on South African shores again?
Oh, well, yeah, I'd love to be going down to South Africa. I'd love to be going anywhere, to be honest with you. If I could go down and follow the lines, if they make it down to South Africa, you know, that would be a great experience. But no, look, I haven't been for some time. I love South Africa. I love Southern Africa in general. I was actually, I went on my honeymoon to Namibia and spent many summers with my family, my father in South Africa and Botswana and Zimbabwe and places like that. So I'd love to go back, and definitely, hopefully it's in the future, not too distant future.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, and yeah, open invitation. We'd love to have you. Hopefully, we can coincide it with some, you know, fun whiskey activities and do some drinking. But yeah, I can't believe it's already been an hour, and just cognizant of your time and our viewers. Yeah, I mean, you know, thank you so much. It is, I literally could just sit and chat. There's so much. I feel like we've just started, you know, peeling an onion. There are just so many more layers and so much more to talk to. We'll have to have you back, and maybe, you know, do a deeper dive on one or two things. But I mean, we really appreciate it. And I think you've done a very good job at just kind of touching on everything broadly, both kind of the history, G and D. You must do this regularly.
Well, no, it's been a while now, like, you know, so it's no, good. Look, great. Always a pleasure talking to you, Mark. We appreciate all your support and what you do for whiskey in general in South Africa. So look, thank you very much for the opportunity, and hopefully, as you say, well, we'd love to welcome you to Dublin as well. But hopefully I can get to South Africa and, you know, as I said, share a drink face to face.
Excellent. Well, yeah, Jack, all the best. Take care. Good luck with the distillery. We'll be watching, you know, with bated breath on the side. And yeah, regards to the family, and look forward to drinking your wares.
Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Take care. Thank you very much. All right. I think that we're almost right on time, which I do think is important. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Again, sincere thanks to Jack for joining us. giving his time, giving his knowledge. I'm sure you would agree, just like me. I mean, we could just chat for hours. There was so much to chat about too when it comes to Jack and the Teeling family, and just all the exciting things happening in Ireland. But watch the space. Let's do this again. Thank you for your attention, and yeah, wish everyone a good evening, a good weekend that's coming up, and we'll see you next month. We do have plans for another WB Live. On behalf of kind of the Whiskey Brother family, have a good night, and we will speak to you. We'll see you again soon. Cheers.